You're listening to Well and Worthy Life, the podcast that helps midlife women feel better, look better, and live better. I'm your host, Deanna, menopause wellness coach turned to lifestyle creator, and I'm here to give you all of my tips, tools, and real talk you need to thrive in this second half of life. Hey guys, welcome back to Well and Worthy Life. I'm so excited to have back Cynthia Thurlow. She's been on the podcast before, and she is a nurse practitioner, TEDx speaker, and women's health expert. She has a new book out that we're going to talk all about, The Menopause Gut, and it's redefining how we think about midlife health. We talk so much about hormones and perimenopause and menopause, but Cynthia's bringing attention to something that impacts everything, our gut and immune system. If you're dealing with bloating, fatigue, brain fog, stubborn weight gain, or feeling like your body just isn't responding the way it used to, hello, all of us, right? This conversation is going to connect some dots. So, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining me again today on Well and Worthy Life.
Well, I've been so looking forward to this conversation and, one that I know that will really appeal to your listeners because as I oftentimes say, menopause or even perimenopause is more than just hormone replacement therapy. I mean, obviously it's very important. It's something you and I both fervently believe in, but there's more to the conversation.
Yes, and I didn't really realize until I started reading through your book the impact of the gut. I've always heard about this gut-brain connection, but I didn't really understand any of this. And so I think this is going to be a great conversation. Let's start from the beginning because you share in the book that a personal health crisis forced you to look deeper at what was happening hormonally. Can you tell us what happened and what surprised you the most?
Yeah, it's amazing. So in 2018, my husband and I were celebrating our 15th wedding anniversary, and my kids were getting a little older. So we decided to, just the two of us, go to Morocco and southern Spain. And so it was amazing and beautiful, and we had an amazing time. But when I was in Morocco, and my husband and I largely ate exactly the same foods while we were traveling, and I got the worst food poisoning of my life to the point where by the time I got to Spain, the joke became, oh, everyone gets food poisoning in Morocco. And I said, but you don't understand. I've never been this sick from something I ate. And I don't think I fully appreciated that the symptoms and the severity of what I experienced was a reflection of what was changing in my body as I was navigating perimenopause and menopause. And fast forward a few months later, I ended up spending 13 days in the hospital with a ruptured appendix and a whole slew of complications. And kind of the working hypothesis after talking to my medical team, because I was so sick, was that I probably picked up a friend when I was in Morocco that might have contributed, because it's not common to see a mid to late 40s person with a ruptured appendix. It's much more common to see that in younger patients. And they were like, maybe picking up Giardia might have made this the perfect storm in my digestive system to end up being hospitalized. So when I reflect back, I'm like, oh, it makes so much more sense just by virtue of the way our immune system is changing and just having leaky gut, which clearly I had, and a lot of endotoxin that was leaked into my bloodstream, which was what provoked the severity of symptoms, and why my wonderful husband literally had no symptoms whatsoever. Like when I thought I was dying next to the toilet in Spain, my husband was sleeping through all of my symptoms, had no idea what was going on. So, like so many of our husbands do, right?
That sounds familiar.
They're like, wake up in the morning. What do you mean? I don't remember anything. It's like they sleep so restfully. But I think it really speaks to the fact that as our bodies are losing hormones, it kind of provokes our immune system. It's more reactive. We're more likely to have leaky gut. We're more likely to have this kind of exaggerated immune response. And it also coincided with symptoms patients were experiencing and also looking at diagnostic testing for my patients. Because I remember saying, I'm not even sure I fully appreciated or realized it because it was not something I learned during my training. There just wasn't a lot of education about the aging process in women. It was more like women drop off a cliff in menopause. And I was like, that's so many years away. I don't need to think about that until we get to that point. And then I'm like, oh, this is something I think we really need to understand how our physiology is changing in middle age.
Well, and don't you think that we've come so far. I mean, just even since the last time you and I spoke, we've come
Mhm.
so far in what we know and what we've learned, and I think we still have a long way to go. I tell my daughter-in-laws all the time, like, we will have this so much more figured out by the time y'all get to this age. So y'all are gonna have a breeze compared to to our journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. I say that to my nieces who are, teenagers for the large part. I'm like, "Guess what? By the time you reach this stage, which they think is a million miles away," I'm
Right.
like, "There will be so much more education and there'll be so much more advocacy than even what we all have experienced in our lifetime."
Right, because they don't teach any of this in medical school. And I would venture to say they still don't teach it right now in medical school. Is that right? Do you know?
There's probably very little. I think unless you're in a women's health track, like I'm sure, well, I would hope if you're a family medicine or OBGYN or a women's health expert or in those training tracks, I would hope that they're talking about it. But I think that for so many years, women were left out of research, number one, because of the
Mhm.
confounding variable of having a menstrual cycle. And then I think even in terms of aging research, there just hasn't been a lot of interest in really looking at middle-aged men and women. I think it's kind of the
Mhm.
extremes. There's a lot of research on younger patients, older patients, and then, we're all kind of in the in-between in middle age. And so my hope is that that will start changing. But I've spoken to enough GYNs on the podcast to know that most of them had little to no education. It was like the same
Mhm.
thing I said. There was like a blip in my nurse practitioner training about menopause, and then literally, I don't think I ever thought about it again because it was never emphasized, even in critical care and cardiology, where I spent, 20 years. We just didn't differentiate between male
Mhm.
patients, female patients, not much at all, although we were sensitive to gender differences. But the point being, there just
Mhm.
wasn't a lot of vibrant research to direct how we were treating patients.
Yeah, and I do think that a lot of the women, as they go through and experience this perimenopause, menopause, it's finally like an aha moment, like, "Oh,
Mhm.
wow."
Yeah.
Maybe my patients that were complaining about something different that I didn't even have a clue of. So I love that. So we kind of understand about the estrogen drops in menopause, but they don't connect that to our brains. When we think about that, we don't really connect our estrogen to our gut health. So, can you explain that relationship in simple terms, like in terms
Yes.
where I can understand?
Yeah, yeah, no, no. I mean, so estrogen and progesterone and testosterone have systemic effects. It's not just bikini medicine. It's not just about fertility. And when I think about estrogen in the gut, the big things that stand out for me, estrogen's a potent immune modulator, which is a fancy way of saying when estrogen declines, it impacts our immune system substantially. So we're more likely to see leaky gut, more inflammation, more aches and pains, alterations in serotonin and melatonin, which impacts sleep.
Mhm.
Not to mention it impacts motility in the gut. So women will say, when I'm in perimenopause and menopause, it just seems like food sits in my stomach longer. That is a byproduct of changes in smooth muscle contractility related to progesterone, but also the signaling molecule called nitric oxide that is innervates with estrogen. So estrogen goes down, less gut innervation, less movement, can also impact how we process
Mhm.
estrogen in the body. But when we're talking specifically about how estrogen influences the brain, it's helpful to know there's like a communication pathway between the brain and the gut. It's called the vagus nerve. I don't think it gets enough respect.
Mhm.
It's a really important
Mhm.
communication tool, but it also transmits information. So when you're stressed and you get butterflies in your stomach or that sensation of butterflies, that is the communication of your brain telling your gut, I'm anxious. For the
Mhm.
same reason that as we see declines in certain types of neurotransmitters, that can impact mood and anxiety, depression. And for a lot of women, the week before their menstrual cycle, they'll notice alterations in sleep, more anxiety, more depression. That just gets magnified as we're heading into perimenopause and menopause. So estrogen is a potent stimulator of neuroplasticity, which means it allows us to think. We're able to make connections between different brain cells. Also, really important for the hippocampus, which is kind of like the center of learning and memory in the brain. And so, as estrogen is ebbs and flows throughout progesterone, some women are more sensitive to that. That is very much a bio individual thing. I never really had brain fog symptoms, but I've had plenty of patients that have said, I just feel like I can't think straight. And that can be inflammation because inflammation in the gut can transfer to inflammation in the brain, but it can also be people that are just much more sensitive to adjustments in circulating estradiol levels. And so I think when I think about brain, it's understanding that estrogen is really this very important hormone for metabolic health. So it helps with, not to mention insulin sensitivity. So women, until they go into menopause, even before perimenopause, tend to be more insulin sensitive because of the circulating hormone estrogen. But as estrogen's declining, we start to see more poor metabolic health issues. And so when women talk about brain fog or just not feeling mentally clear, it can also be a sign that they have a loss of insulin sensitivity. And people think a lot about glucose, so that's our blood sugar, but insulin oftentimes is the first biomarker that will change. So I always kind of remind women that first and foremost, perimenopause and menopause are as unique as you are. Just like probably all of us did not have the same experience with our menstrual cycles or how we felt when we were menstruating. I would say the same thing applies to this time in our lives. So some people will get a lot of symptoms and others won't get as much. And I do feel, after spending the last 10 years working with women, like really in this age group, that how we take care of ourselves has a lot to do with how we feel at this stage in our lives. Like I jokingly will say that if any of us are still eating like we did at 18, we're probably not feeling very good. That the pizza, the late night binges, the alcohol consumption that most like college and young adults are doing do not serve us well in middle age. So to kind of snapshot all of this, it's understanding that estrogen, progesterone, testosterone are systemic hormones. They're not bikini medicine hormones. And that in nearly every cell in the body or every organ system in the body, they do have effects. But thinking about that communication superhighway between the brain and the gut really helps us understand why poor gut health will exacerbate symptoms that we experience. And I remind people, like, if you have leaky gut, if you have an autoimmune condition, you very likely have leaky brain. The brain is designed to be impermeable, meaning that things should not pass all that easily into the brain. But when you've got a leaky gut, that leads to a leaky brain. So, more often than not,
Mm.
brain symptoms are a reflection of what's going on in the gut.
So tell us about leaky gut. Explain that because I hear this term a lot and I'm not sure that I even understand exactly what leaky gut is.
No, it's such a great question. So, our small intestine, which is where, when we talk about leaky gut, that's what we're speaking
Mhm.
to. And for anyone that's interested, small intestinal hyperpermeability, it is a real thing. It is not a buzzword. Leaky gut just means that one cell layer thick of the small intestine has opened up. It's like gates. If the gates open, then when you eat food, you can leak food particles into your bloodstream. You can provoke an immune response. And for anyone who has celiac, Hashimoto's thyroiditis,
Mm.
lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, any of those constellation, there's over 100 autoimmune conditions. You at some point have had a leaky gut. It could be from taking a dose of antibiotics that are appropriately prescribed, which is why we try to be so proactive about not over prescribing them. It can be from a standard American diet, which has a lot of additives, emulsifiers, artificial sugars that aren't good for our gut. It can be from chronic stress. And in the book, The Menopause Gut, I talk a lot about the cumulative effects of chronic stress, not the I'm having a conversation with Deanna and we're both excited and engaged and my cortisol's up a little bit. Probably yours is too because we're
Mhm.
engaged. That's different than someone who's gone
Mhm.
through a divorce. They have a significant loss. They lose their job. They have a major move. Like those kinds of insults to the
Mhm.
gut can provoke leaky gut. But the most important takeaway is
Mhm.
leaky gut is fixable. But for a
Mhm.
lot of people, they walk around not realizing that they are at risk or that they actually have leaky gut. But the biggest takeaway is you have some type of an insult. It opens up the gates to the small intestine. You leak food particles into the bloodstream. It typically will provoke an immune response, but it can provoke other things. We
Mhm.
know that our immune system declines a bit in middle age. And so it explains why you can have, like, I had all those symptoms. Like, my
Mhm.
husband had no symptoms and I had so many symptoms. It's because my immune system was just not as adept as it has once been. Like, I'm sure with my husband, he ate it, probably had a little bit of an upset stomach and didn't think anything more of it. And then I had
Mhm.
this very exaggerated response because the immune system ages just along with us. Some people call it inflammaging. You call it immunosenescence. It means the same thing. The immune system ages right along with us.
It's so funny when I read your story in there, I didn't know. I remembered you being in the hospital for a long time, but I didn't know about the Morocco story. And just last summer, not this past summer, summer before last, my husband and I were in Aspen and we ate the same thing, the exact same thing. I was kind of like you. I ended up in the bathroom
Mhm.
all
Yep.
night long throwing my guts up while he was over there sleeping.
Yep.
Like, I thought I was dying, and I still don't know what that was, but I did seem to be more sick that year. I hadn't thrown up in forever, and then all of a sudden, so I guess my immune, maybe I picked up something, and my immune system was really low because of
Yeah.
all my declining. I'm in menopause and have been for a while. So
Well, I'm
okay.
sorry to hear you had that same experience, but not surprised that your husband slept through it. I think men can sleep through anything. Just like crying babies when we're younger, they can sleep through anything.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so what are one or two habits that make the biggest impact on gut health in menopause?
Well, I would say, I mean, really, like I always say, majoring the majors. It's so fun to talk about peptides and hormones, and
Hmm.
those are important. Let me be clear,
Right.
but like the basics still apply. So we know that your sleep quality has a
Hmm.
tremendous effect on your gut health because we even have little circadian clocks in the gut. Like if you eat a late meal, it kind of shuts down production of melatonin so
Hmm.
that your body processes food. So really getting good at high quality sleep, and that's not 5 hours a night. Most of us need 7, 8 hours a night of good quality sleep, cold, dark room, and just really prioritizing it. Like I jokingly said to my husband last night, I had a really tough training day with my trainer in the morning. And after a couple podcasts at like 8 o'clock at night, I was like, I am totally out of gas. I need to go to
Hmm.
bed, which he thought was hilarious. So I was in bed by 8:45 and asleep and slept 9 hours, but I needed it. But the
Hmm.
point for all of us, we really have to prioritize good quality sleep. And for
Hmm.
most of us, that usually entails lifestyle measures, plus or minus progesterone, plus or minus our estrogen being optimal, plus or minus, I'm a huge fan of like adaptogenic herbs or
Hmm.
melatonin, like making sure you have a sleep stack, but really prioritizing sleep. I would say the next thing that I think is really important for women to consider is managing your stress because when I'm
Hmm.
stressed, as are most of my patients, it shows up in me waking up in the middle of the night. And I think for a lot of women, they're like, oh, I just need to meditate for 5 minutes once a week. And I'm like, no, we become less stress resilient, much less stress resilient in perimenopause and menopause. So all of a sudden, we have to be better at cultivating boundaries, about
Hmm.
saying no, about being attuned to the fact that we can tell when our cortisol levels are higher. And then we just have to do more. Like I was saying to my husband, the other day I was like, now it's like an art form. What are the things I need to do to like bring down my cortisol and to like manage my autonomic nervous system? And it goes back to the vagus nerve, things that we can do throughout the day that stimulate that vagus nerve, whether it's singing, gargling, humming, breath work,
Hmm.
meditation, connection to nature in the morning, just finding little grounding. Right now, it finally has gotten warmer in Virginia, so I can
Hmm.
actually put my feet in the ground, but really finding ways to support your autonomic nervous system and that vagus nerve throughout the day. And I'm talking about these things before we even talk about gadgets that can do that for us,
Right.
and those are fun, but like these foundational elements. So if you can manage your sleep and you can manage your stress levels better, every
Hmm.
other symptom will improve. But I would say those
Right.
foundational elements are really important before we even get to hormones, peptides, supplements, exercise,
Hmm.
which is certainly important. But chronic stress and not managing your stress will worsen your gut health substantially. And we didn't even have a conversation about adverse childhood events and trauma and all those
Right.
things. But like
Yeah.
we can look at this is where the wheels will fall off the bus for many women is in middle age when suddenly there's stuff. They hold it together really well, but then they get to perimenopause. And with these changes in
Hmm.
hormones and neurotransmitters, they can't manage or modulate their sleep and their stress quite as well. And so you have
Hmm.
to deal with yourself. Like I think for so many of us, and I'm sure Deanna, you're
Hmm.
much like I am, reform people pleaser. I've been such a people pleaser
Oh,
for my
yeah.
entire life that middle age is when we have to get really clear about saying no, creating boundaries, both of
Hmm.
which impact sleep and stress management.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate that. I think that it is so important that we fix the basics before we start adding all these other things on top of it. I think we are in a society where we want something in quick fix and
Hmm.
give us a pill or anything like that. And honestly, doctors are very willing to give you something,
Yep.
and it could not be hormones. It could be, all kinds of different things. But
I think that's what you really have to get your sleep. I mean, it is a joke between me and my husband with my sleep. I prioritize my sleep over everything.
Good.
I mean, even when we were out of town this past week, we went to dinner with some people and they knew 9 o'clock is my limit. Done. I don't care if I'm out of town or what. I'm like, I have to be getting ready for bed at least by 9 o'clock because I know that my sleep is so important. And then I pretty much eliminated alcohol because that interrupts my sleep.
Mhm.
So it is things like that that we have to prioritize before we can use all the other things that can help us, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so I do want to just touch on this intermittent fasting because that's why you were on my podcast before. We talked about
Mhm.
intermittent fasting. And just like I mentioned at the very beginning, we've learned so much more now about intermittent fasting than we even knew back then. So tell me what do you think about intermittent fasting at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I still think of it as a good strategy. I want to be very clear. I do, however, think that my opinion has evolved because a lot of women that were
Mhm.
really fervently abiding by like very strict feeding and fasting windows just weren't eating enough. They were
Mhm.
undernourishing their bodies. They were over fasting. They were over stressing their bodies. Remember, I mentioned about cortisol and sleep and
Yes.
stress management. And so, my biggest concern for middle aged women is making sure they're eating enough protein. And I oftentimes will ask women, like, let's track your macros for a week
Mhm.
objectively, how much protein you're eating. Most of my patients, 60, 70 grams, that's it. That's not enough to maintain or build muscle. And so
Mhm.
I now have coined a term called digestive rest, which gives people 12 hours
Mhm.
in which to have at least 2 to 3 meals, 2 to 3 really good portions of protein, and aiming for no less than 100 grams of protein because I think far too many women were just unknowingly undernourishing their bodies. And we know that sarcopenia, which is this muscle loss with aging, is a question of if or when. If it's not a question of if, but when. And so
Mhm.
we really have to be very diligent. We need more protein because we actually have require more to trigger muscle protein synthesis, which is
Mhm.
what helps us build and maintain. So I still think of it as a good strategy. However, I prefer to utilize it less frequently if I have a patient that's not metabolically healthy, like if someone has 50, 100 pounds to lose, maybe they're on a GLP-1, maybe they're not.
Mhm.
I think these drugs have really, they're probably the most important drug that I can think of in my lifetime in terms of
Mhm.
applicability, because it's more than just weight loss. There's a lot of
Mhm.
benefits that go beyond that. But I think for a lot of individuals, they're like, oh, I don't need to fast because I'm on a GLP-1. But I think for some of these that are there are people that are very metabolically unhealthy, I think a
Mhm.
compressed feeding window may be beneficial because maybe they've
Mhm.
gone years eating 14, 15, 16 hours out of the day, and having a compressed feeding window may be beneficial for them. But I think that we have to be, it's just like any strategy. I think we have to be mindful of where we are in our lives, how much stress we've already done. Like if you're going through a divorce and you're over exercising and you think having a 4-hour feeding window is going to benefit your body, I'm here to tell you, you need to do less, not more. Like that is something
Mhm.
that for a lot of middle-aged women is a little bit of a tough thing to wrap their heads around. So to answer your question, I still believe
Mhm.
in it as a strategy. I don't do a lot of it. I do it when I travel just because sometimes I don't have access to decent quality
Mhm.
food while I'm traveling. But having said that, it's more this 12 to 13 hours that gives most of my patients enough time to consume high enough quality protein, especially if someone's on a GLP-1, you have to be myopically focused. Just
Mhm.
like on the sleep, you have to be myopically focused on your protein intake and strength training. But I think for a lot of people, they find if they start tracking their macros, they're like, oh, I'm nowhere near where I need to
Mhm.
be. And Deanna, let's be transparent. Our generations grew up feeling that thin was in, skinny was what
Yeah.
we were aiming for. And
That's so
so
true.
what a lot of people don't realize, and I think this is an important point, right now we're both active and healthy and we're so fortunate.
Mhm.
But 15, 20 plus years down the road, for those people who have not maintained and built muscle, they are going to put themselves at risk for frailty, and frailty leads to falls, and that leads to a loss of independence. And that's what we want to avoid. So
Mhm.
it may be hard to imagine that right now if you're listening to this podcast, but that's my concern is that we have to be
Mhm.
thinking about the bodies we are building now so that we can avoid being in a wheelchair, a walker, or having to not live independently because I don't think
Mhm.
anyone wants that. Ideally, no one wants
Right.
that for themselves.
And that's kind of the way I think of at 60 right now. I think about me at 80, and I have a granddaughter that's 6 right now. And I think I want to be able to travel with her. I've got another
Mhm.
grandson on the way. I mean, I want to be able to do all the things with them. And I don't want to be in a wheelchair or pushing me around.
Mhm.
That's not going to be fun.
Yeah,
We talk about going to Paris and all these different fun
I love
things.
that.
So I've got to be in good shape. And so I do think that is, but you're so right about this thing about it's still ingrained in my mind about being skinny. I have a
Mhm.
friend that lost a lot of weight on GLP-1, and at different points, and when I stand next to her when I'm exercising, we're looking at mirrors, and I start comparing my body to hers, and I think,
Mhm.
oh, you need to lose some weight, Deanna. Oh, you know, and I don't. I have more muscle probably, although she is very muscular, but she's very thin too.
Mhm.
So, I do think about that. I think about 20 years from now, even 30 years from now, and what life do I want to lead? And I do focus on my protein because I know that our protein is so important. Let's go to supplements because we talked about supplements and all that. So, what do you think is actually worth it and what is overhyped?
Oh, I love this question. I would say I like supplements that address multiple things at once because
Mhm.
no one listening, including myself, wants to be taking 20, 30 supplements every day. So number
Mhm.
one, what is your lab work demonstrating? Like, I feel like I will be taking vitamin D until the day I die. My levels are, unless I take vitamin D, they're never optimal. So vitamin D and magnesium, obviously really
Mhm.
important. Magnesium in particular because it's involved in over 400 different biochemical processes in our bodies. And
Mhm.
after working in cardiology, when I tested my patients, I would say 90% of them were not therapeutic. So magnesium for
Mhm.
sure. Creatine monohydrate. And I
Mhm.
think that this is multi-purpose. It can be helpful for sleep architecture, jet lag, muscle strength, bone health, obviously at higher doses
Mhm.
when I take it for jet lag, but creatine monohydrate for sure. I would say things like adaptogenic herbs, so things like
Mhm.
ashwagandha, relora,
Mhm.
rhodiola, depending on where you are in time and space. Some of them can be tonifying, like ashwagandha can be both stimulating and also tonifying, meaning it can help buffer cortisol.
Mhm.
Others can be helpful for sleep. Things that I think are overhyped. I know I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this. Colostrum, I don't really understand. I don't like, I've seen some of the research. I've talked about it on social media. I think at one point we had a podcast sponsor just for short term
Mhm.
the benefits of colostrum. I think there's other ways that we can support our gut. I don't per se think that that's a forever
Mhm.
supplement. I would say the other things are non-therapeutic doses of things like, one of the magnesium formulations we used to give in the hospital was called magnesium oxide, and you
Mhm.
can absorb about 11% of that. So if you're listening, you take magnesium oxide, toss it in the garbage because you're just creating expensive urine. But I think beyond that, I think that some of the interesting things that are coming that I do believe in the science behind, like urolithin A, that's a
Mhm.
signaling molecule. I do talk about it in the book. I think that, when I'm looking at to pare down someone's supplement list, we just get really granular. And to
Mhm.
be totally transparent, it's like, are you dealing with like a lot of stress? Then you might need more like B vitamins and vitamin C and magnesium. Are you dealing with sleep issues? Then maybe adding in things like myo-inositol or adaptogenic herbs can be helpful for sleep, or even melatonin,
Mhm.
which a lot of people like to fearmonger that. And I'm like, if
Mhm.
melatonin declines with age and it's a master antioxidant, why would we not be supplementing it? So
Mhm.
I would say those in a nutshell are the things I think are helpful. Colostrum is definitely overhyped. And I would also say branched chain amino acids,
Mhm.
because you actually need like all the essential amino acids if you're going to take those. That's a way that I buffer travel. But branched chain amino acids, I would add in there supplemental calcium. I'd rather you get it from food based sources. And I actually did a YouTube video on like supplements that I think are like not worth your money. And I
Oh,
think all of those are included in there.
we'll try
Maybe
to
not
link to
colostrum, but
that. That would be
definitely,
good.
yeah, definitely the calcium and branched chain amino acids, because I think there's other ways to
Mhm.
supplement around your diet, but I totally get it. We're a nation that really likes to take supplements and medications versus like lifestyle adjustments because it's harder, right? Like it's like human
Exactly.
nature to say, give me the pill, because that's what my patients used to tell me, just give me the pill, shut up, and I'm not going to change my lifestyle. Or, it's not necessarily what we want to do. And I get it.
Mhm.
We have to
Yeah.
actually do the work.
Yeah. I think that's so important. We have to do the work and then we can add the supplements to help. But we still have to go back to the basics. Okay, what's one misconception about menopause health you'd love to see disappear?
I think that there's still this myopic focus that all you need is an estrogen patch, oral
Mm,
progesterone, plus or minus testosterone, and that fixes everything. Because if you don't address, I call it majoring in the majors, but if you don't address exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress management, if you don't address those things and then looking at gut health,
mhm,
you're never going to get the gains that you want. I mean, why are there women that get put on HRT and they gain 15 pounds? And it's like because the very foundational elements are not being addressed. If you are struggling with sleep and you can't manage your stress,
okay,
and you feel like the wheels have literally fallen off the bus, it could very likely be that you've got underlying stress and trauma that's driving a lot of these things. Because think about it, over time, cortisol is catabolic. It breaks down muscles. It leads to leaky gut. It lessens our ability to fight infections, when we're stressed. And so I think for a lot of people, they think it's just about hormones. And
mhm,
successfully navigating middle age and beyond is way more than that. If you don't lay the
mhm.
foundation, the hormones are like, it's almost like Teflon. You just can't permeate. And so I think for a lot of people, whether it's good or bad, I'm glad we're talking about HRT, but HRT is layered in just like everything else.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Just quickly, I just had a conversation with a woman today at exercise class, at Pilates class, and she asked me if I take testosterone. And I said yes. She said she just started taking, or again, using the cream, and she's gained weight. And so I was
Mm.
like, I don't know. You need to figure that out. But she says
Yep.
every time she's gained weight. So I'll be sending this podcast to her and your book to her for sure.
Well, thank
Because
you.
I don't hear it often, but I do hear that some that
Yeah.
women have gained weight with HRT. So that's interesting.
And that's a
Okay.
fear everyone has. Like, we're still
Mhm.
dealing with the after effects of being skinny and being told we need to be skinny. So that just adds another layer of stress for women, right?
Oh, it is so right. It is so right. Oh my gosh. Okay. If a woman feels like she's losing herself in midlife, what would you want her to understand about her body right now?
You have to think of it, it's a marathon, it's not a
Mm,
race. I think a lot of women, it's human nature not to be patient, but you have to be
mhm,
patient with the process. And I can tell you, I got 10 years ago when I was in the throes of perimenopause, I was totally stuck, weight loss resistant. I felt terrible. I wasn't sleeping. I was totally fried. And
okay,
so I think sharing that plenty of us have been through that, just knowing
mhm,
that you have to work I hate to say this, you have to work the program. You have to start with the basics and then, it's diving a little deeper. Is your thyroid underactive? Is your gut a disaster, which in most
mhm,
instances it is? Do you have significant underlying trauma and stress that's driving your body not feeling safe? Because like I said, a lot of very high achieving, successful women get to middle age and it's almost like they just get cracked wide open. It's like whether they go through a divorce or they just have like a
mhm,
reckoning of deciding like, are they happy where they are in time and
mhm,
space? And, when you start losing your hormones and your neurotransmitters and they're fluctuating, it can make it harder to deal with life. And so
mhm,
just know that you need the right resources, the right people to support you, trust the process. I feel like perimenopause is the storm and then
mhm,
menopause is this kind of calm. If you
mhm,
are changing things and advocating for yourself and working with the right practitioners and therapists. I mean, I jokingly, openly talk about the fact I will probably be in some form of therapy for the rest
mhm,
of my life, which is good for me because I talk
mhm,
it all out. But for a lot of people, it's acknowledging you need help and then finding the right people to help you. And then just
mhm,
being patient, which I know is the hardest thing in the world to do. No
mhm,
one wants to be patient. We want everything instantaneously, we want everything to be fixed. And it takes time to figure out exactly what the power of the N of one, like what you as a person need to be able to thrive in this stage of life, because it's a little bit different for everybody. There's some common themes, but it's a
mhm.
little bit different for every woman.
I agree with that totally because we're all different. And so my experience may be different from yours, and just like it's different from my friends and everything else. And I think that it is evolving. I mean, at 60, I feel like I'm still learning and I'm trying to figure out what is the best thing that works for me. Whether it's, well, I know the basics, I know my basics for sure, but now it's between hormone therapy and supplements and where do I feel my best and what do I feel my best when my eating schedule and what I eat and things like that. Again, it's like the alcohol. So
Yep.
I think we all have to advocate for ourselves. I think that is so important. So Cynthia, I hate to end this conversation because you and I could talk forever and ever. I just love everything that you're doing. And I'm so excited for your new book, The Menopause Gut. Tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find the book, all the things.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to connect with you and your community. It's always such a pleasure to do so. So, the Menopause Gut is officially on sale April 28th, 2026. So, by the time this podcast is out, it'll be able to be you'll be able to pick it up. You can find me across social media, but probably easiest to connect with me on my website. So www.cynthiathurlow.com. I have a podcast called Everyday Wellness, which is one of my favorite things I do in my business, but I'm active all across social media, actively working on Substack. That's where, if you're interested in like really getting to know my philosophy, my gestalt of life, I share a lot of things very transparently there. But the Menopause Gut is out. And I would love for you to add this to your library of books. I think it's really unique, and there's really no one else talking about these things that I think are very important and very relevant to us as middle-aged women.
Yeah. Oh, I agree totally. Well, thank you again. And everybody be sure and go out and grab the book. You're going to love it, just like her other book that I love so much. Cynthia, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you guys for joining me. Hey, don't forget, if this resonates with you, be sure and share it with a friend. Thanks.
Thanks for being here, friend. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode, and keep choosing what makes you feel well and worthy.